Horror is one of the many ways people find entertainment. Whether it be true crime or horror movies and video games, you could find horror in almost every corner of the internet. Horror is something many people strive to bring variety to every day, which is why there are now such odd ideas for horror that work so well, like analog horror or the backrooms. This is not true for Roblox, however. In such a trash meta like Roblox, not only are all of the games extremely similar, they all share the same insufferable aspects of gameplay. I'm here today to talk about it and warn you all to not spend time playing these games. The thing about these games is that they are trying to make the most quote-unquote scary game with the least effort. These games don't usually try to monetize everything, which is good I guess, but I have seen some where you get a certain amount of lives before you just have to pay to respawn back. So what is the least effort they can put in to make something scary or unsettling? The main thing I'm noticing is darkness. Many people fear the dark, and so making things dark should easily make a game scary, right? Well, for people who can see through it, it isn't. It just makes it extremely annoying to see and feel tedious to explore. You can make the game dark, sure, but complete darkness just kinda turns me off. Many successful horror games like Outlast or Alien Isolation have lights in some areas and still find a way to make it scary. Another big part of horror is the sounds. The dialogue that plays while a character is being chased, or the noises that are there to build up tension. There's an attempt to do this in these horror games, but the music is often just repetitive or non-existent. I would think there being no music serves as a way to make the game scarier, yet the main method I believe they're going for is trying to scare people through the use of shock and not tension or anything else. It ends up going for cheap jump scares that have ear-screeching loud noises to get you scared from being startled, rather than from being scared of being in whatever position you're in. I will admit though, the jump scare models and animations are pretty well done. You end up seeing them a lot, so you get multiple chances to appreciate the model work. These horror games also end up having a lot of weird oversights. First one to mention is the flashlight. I think it's important to highlight because it's the main tool you'll be using throughout the game, since you do need to be able to see stuff. The thing about the flashlight in most of these horror games is that it usually doesn't point toward your cursor. Instead, it's an item that just flashes light directly in front of your character and not your camera. I've seen games have flashlights that follow the camera, so I don't know why it can't just be in every game. It would make things easier for developers too if whatever notes they want on the floor could be seen easier. Something that relates to the flashlight is the fact that you can't pick stuff like keys up unless you aren't holding an item. This wouldn't be a problem if the flashlight was built in and not an actual item. It's not really a big deal, but it is an inconvenience. The last weird oversight is how many invisible barriers there are when they could just build a fence or put more mountainous terrain around. I wanted to save the worst for last. It might just be because I'm an idiot, but some of these games just have puzzles that are not immediately obvious. It could be a key hidden in a large dark area, or the thing I dread the most, the mazes. The mazes are basically what it sounds like. It might seem weird for a horror game to have a maze, let alone so many that any person who plays these horror games would know what you're talking about. But for some reason they exist, and they got so popular to the point where a ton of games added them. You basically have to look around a maze for a key or something to get past the door that is also in the maze. If that wasn't bad enough, there's an enemy that chases you. Usually they patrol through a maze, and if you die you have to restart all over. If you decide to run from them, you end up not knowing where you are in the maze and have to wander until you find what you're looking for, or until you die and repeat the process. Sometimes there's a map where you respawn, which can help if you have a picture of it pulled up, but you'd have to make sure you don't lose your way inside. The main Roblox horror game is The Mimic from what I understand. It was made only a year ago in January of 2021 and has close to 5,000 players at all times. It actually has a whole wiki with some pretty deep lore. It's based on Japanese folklore, which is oversaturation on top of oversaturation. I could have nitpicked this game to show how even the biggest games have problems, but I decided to nitpick a smaller one because I ended up finding a lot more just bizarrely funny stuff in that one. The game I'm talking about is called Bewildered. It was made 2 months after The Mimic, but it is still only on the first chapter. It shows how much more work Mimic took and how big the team behind it was. At the start of this game, you wake up in a massive house. It tells you that you can press G to open your inventory, but you don't need it for this part of the game. And it doesn't even get used later on, so I have no clue what it's even there for. At first I had no clue why the house was so big, but looking in the description of the game, I guess that's just how it is. You and your family move to a new gigantic house on a hill hoping to start a new life. but suddenly everything you'd hoped for will be dilapidated by delirium. The real problem I have with this house though is that it just seems like clickbait, because you only get to play as the person in the family for 2 minutes of the game. Maybe it's supposed to be some overarching story that you split gameplay between 2 characters, but I feel like you can incorporate that a lot better. There aren't even any other chapters after that to explain why you were playing in a house and then suddenly you're a different person in a national park. You heard me right. After you do the house mission, you end up as some investigator that goes to a national park. On top of that, it's the dead of night and the name of the park is Devilwood Park. This is where I got extremely confused. Who would go to a park in the middle of the night? What is so worth investigating that you go alone at night to somewhere called Devilwood Park? It's the typical horror trope that I hate. You go explore and get into the park and end up finding lights that are leading you somewhere, which you have no choice but to follow. There's a part where there's just a random generator on a bridge that somehow opens up a fence. I'm not an electrician or anything, but I feel like that's not how it should work. After walking some more, you end up in another maze. I just thought it was really funny how there's a perfectly cut stone maze in the middle of this national park. Everything I presented so far is basically another argument as to why the Roblox game meta is the same old same old. Okay, so yeah, basically horror game bad.
Hi, my name is... Instead, I'm 17 years old. I am very similar to you. Did I mention to you that of girls put